Hello, welcome back to PlayStation Access. My name's Nathan and I'm here with Dave.
Hello.
Hello. We're still remote, Dave, but in remoteness, we have played Cyberpunk 2077. So we thought we'd do a list-based video because we like doing those. But what we wanted to get across was just a sense of what it's actually like to play.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most difficult things about seeing, being excited for a game, big previews. You get to, even when you see the gameplay, you're like, what does it really like to play? How will that work? How will I go around? Especially on an open world game like Cyberpunk 2077. So we're going to try and distill it.
Let's do it. Okay, so number one, we're just going to talk a little bit about character creation. Not some of the ruder bits of character creation, although I did like the little animation that comes up when you switch between things.
Very realistic.
But character creation, first of all, there were three, I don't know if I should call them classes. It's kind of backgrounds, types of character.
Sort of archetypes, yeah.
That were available to us. Having played the tabletop game, we know how these kind of fit into the world. There was a nomad, which is a kind of sort of outside of society, sort of road gang, car guy, Mad Max style person. There's street kids, or there was a corpo. We played nomad.
Yeah, I think it's super important to remember that Cyberpunk 2077 is based on a tabletop RPG, and this character creation really is like a great way of doing that and also introducing you to the world. So like you say, you get to choose a background for your character, which is very important in the tabletop game in terms of giving you a kind of through line, and it's very important in this game. And actually I'm really impressed with how they've made it important in this game. It's not just like adjusting your basic stats. It really does affect how you play and how people interact with you. And then on top of that, as you said, there's all the visual customization, which is a really, really good introduction to the world, because I just hit the random button and the first thing I saw was a guy with a giant blue mohawk and a big orange beard and a bunch of cyberware.
Just a computer in his face.
He had a computer in his face, and then you get into the kind of attributes, which are very, very much taken from the tabletop experience. Which can
you name the key stats there, Dave?
I can't believe you've thrown me under the bus. There was body, reflexes,
yes, indeed,
tech, intellect, and cool.
Oh, I thought you were going to forget cool because
no,
because of your bad cool. Stats.
All I think about is how to be cool. So
okay. So yeah, and within that, of course, so those are the main attributes, and then within that there are enormous skill trees, unlocking things and then upgrading those things, and the web of possible character builds is it's complicated.
It's truly insane, and I mean, we've seen a lot of games that do kind of specialization within game, or let you build your character a certain way. And I don't think I've ever seen as many options as this. The possibilities seem huge. Like each of those attributes we mentioned, those 5 attributes, have their own skill tree, and each of those skill trees can be each of the skills within those skill trees can be upgraded within itself. So when you're leveling up, you get the kind of attribute points that you put into one of your base stats, and then you get other points that you can spend on skills within those trees. So people are going to be really able to really intricately define who their character is and what their character does, how they get around the world and interact with it.
And I want to kind of give just one little bit of context before we move on about this, because it can feel a bit dry in context. Oh, I'm playing an RPG and it's got loads of options. Yeah, I didn't realise that. And of course you did, but it's very different when you think about there are going to be similarities that we're going to bring out to The Witcher 3, which I think a lot of people are going to be familiar with. And of course, one major difference is that when you're playing as Geralt, the world and the reactions of everybody to you, when they're designing the game, they can say, what would happen to Geralt here, or how would he react? Here they have made space for you to be, you're always V, but these different archetypes and the different way that you move through the world and the choices that you've made up until that point is way more of a role-play experience. And
definitely.
That's why this is key.
If I could quickly just pick up on that as well, Nate. Like, I think we've seen things in lots of things in games before in RPGs where you don't get a conversation tree unless you've put points into a certain thing. But I think what's really interesting about this is the character archetype, how important that is. It's kind of how you're seen by other people as well. We played as a nomad, and because of that, certain things were opened up to us, or certain lines of conversation were opened up to us. And it's not, it's nothing we could have done to unlock those things. Couldn't have put all our points in a skill or anything. It's just who you are. I think that's really, really cool. And I don't want to think about replaying Cyberpunk 2077 just yet, because, I think that's going to be thousands of hours, but people are going to get so much replayability out of this, and just changing your character archetype, even if you don't change, your character build.
We'll talk a bit more about the kind of possibilities of stuff when we get onto the missions. But for number 2, maybe a little bit smaller, and it's just because we chose Nomad, we actually started outside of Night City, and I'm not sure that it's something that everybody knows. We were in the Badlands, so there is an element of this open world. The open world mostly takes place in Night City, I think, but there's also an outside.
Yeah, I must admit, I hadn't kept up with that bit of news, so I was really, really blown away to be outside of Night City, and it's so different. It's very kind of like, it's desert basically. It's hot desert, arid, with a few kind of like little outcroppings of buildings here and there. Still, everybody is, a cyborg. Everyone's got tech of some kind. But I didn't know that we were going to be seeing outside of Night City, and it really puts Night City in perspective as well, and it makes it feel like a place within a world, which I think was a really, really interesting take. And then also, and not everyone will have this experience, because if you don't play as a nomad, I'm led to believe, that you will start your adventure somewhere else, which is incredible. But being a nomad and coming to Night City was like a great introduction to it, to get that.
Gotcha. Your character is also a newcomer, right?
Exactly. So you get to see Night City through the character's eyes, the character having never seen it before either, which I thought worked really, really well.
So I did I'm going to be referring to this person throughout our chat, so I should also mention I had an interview with a senior quest designer called Philip Webber from CD Projekt Red, and he did confirm that the Badlands is somewhere that or the country outside of Night City is somewhere you're going to be able to visit within the game. Certain missions will send you there. I don't know how freely you can travel, but it's going to be a factor for other people who play the game too, and I feel like it might be a slightly bigger part of the game than we've heard about so far. Number 3 though, just talking about getting around the world, and also about a sense of the world and how the map works. We're going to chuck a bunch of stuff into this entry. The first thing to mention is, I don't know why you and I hadn't really thought about this that much, but you get a car.
You get a car. I think we saw this first, maybe it was E3 last year, maybe it was the year before, I don't know. But to actually get to control it now was like a dream come true, I think. I don't know if you're the same, but I've always wanted a cyber car. I love tech, and I love the idea of tech being in cars. I love being inside the car, looking at all the screens, all the readouts, the little knobs and switches and things. So just instantly, that's very, very, very cool and exciting. More than that, you actually get to drive it around. So I can't believe I'm being this guy, but it's your roach. You can
even call it, right? You can summon the car.
You can summon your car, and I will honk at you when it arrives, which I
Roach
particularly enjoyed. But what I really didn't realise is that it's not your only car. For a start, you can hijack other cars.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And one of the things talking about the customization, how you hijack a car can relate to your stats. So if you're very strong, you can just rip the door off. If you're tech savvy, you can hack a car.
That's so cool.
You can also get cars as rewards for missions. I think you build up a garage. I'm not sure the cars are customizable themselves, but you're going to have enough choice within your garage, and you can choose whichever car you want to summon at any given moment. We were interested in whether people would tend to walk or drive around Night City. It's a very different environment to, obviously it's a very different environment, but in a not obvious way. It's not open in the same way that, The Witcher feels like this place of incredible possibility because it's so open as a landscape. Night City isn't like that, and I think that basically what Philip said was players who are role-playing tend to drive because they're like, I'm doing my job, I've got to get here, I've got to meet this person. Maybe people who are soaking in the world a bit more are walking around, like just seeing how a neighborhood looks, looking at the lighting effects, like listening to a particular track. So that was interesting to me. I think people are going to experience it in different ways, and there is to my point, which I guess was just about how much this world seems so much more. It's a very dense world. I feel like both you and I experienced it as. It doesn't necessarily have that same sense of openness as other open worlds. And he was saying that they deliberately worked really hard on getting a variety of different districts in there. So There's where we were, but there's also places like Japantown, which is really affluent. There's an industrial area. There's North Oak, which is like a suburban area. There's a corporate city centre, and there's Pacifica, which is like an old kind of tourist place. And I think that the feel of those different districts is going to be the equivalent to being, in Velen versus Kaer Morhen versus White Orchard or something like that. So that was good. And also then we have a bunch of questions about the map. You and I didn't really do a bunch of exploring or doing side quests, but it turns out there's tons out there, man.
Yeah. I mean, I saw all the. I looked at the map and it's really, really big. And then I obviously saw lots of question marks on the map, which are very familiar to me. So but you found out what the kinds of things you're going to find.
Yeah, well, I would just bash through them, I think. So I think the philosophy of how these games. I think the CD Projekt Red has a philosophy and approach to making players feel engaged in an open world, and that part of it comes down to what they call their POI system, which is the point of interest, where they don't want to pull you too far away from the main mission, but they do want there to be constant things going on. So there's a main story, there are side quests which you might happen upon. They can be delivered not in the same way that they are in The Witcher, but in ways that make sense to the world of Cyberpunk. So it might be a radio message, it might be a text message that gets delivered to you, you might meet someone on the street, you might meet someone in a bar. That hooks you into a whole different sort of quest. There are open world missions which are more kind of text-based and narrative, and I think that might be finding a note, exploring somewhere, finding something else. There are blue arrows, which are crimes in process, because as you and I know from having played a little bit of the game, V is hooked into the Night City Police Department systems, and they outsource bounties. There are gang outposts, which are kind of like open world staple of just going somewhere and shooting a bunch of gang members. Street stories, which come from, there are fixers in each I guess a bit like Witcher contracts, kinda. Fixers in each district, and they will give you stories which specific to them, and then there are stashes which sound a little bit like treasure hunts from to get the best gear, to get certain rare items. So it feels like the world is going to be full of way more stuff than we saw.
I think hugely. I mean, we really did stick to the golden path. It's absolutely vast, and we only saw that one very small area of the map, as you pointed out. There's like a lot of different districts, I think, that will give you a different feel. So it's almost overwhelming, to be honest. I'm really excited to really get my teeth into it.
I think overwhelming is a feeling I've had about Cyberpunk. There's going to be so much to learn. Okay, I'm going to drop 2 facts, then move on to number 4. Those 2 facts are, there's car combat, which we experienced really early on, leaning out of a car and shooting. And just in general, the UI currently is quite similar to the Witcher UI in when you bring up the map. And you can also, we needed to be somewhere at a certain point. We needed a nightclub to open up, and so we just had to wait for that to happen. You can skip time, same as you can in The Witcher. That
true.
Might be interesting to Witcher players.
Since you've mentioned car combat, I'm going to just jump in and say that you can do that both as the driver and as a passenger. Okay. And also, I wanted to just point out that this is an open world game, like some other open world games set in cities. You can just run amok and you can shoot cars until they explode.
And it will warn you,
and the police will come after you. And I shot a car until it exploded, and I got a warning. The police didn't come after me, and I decided not to pursue that line of questioning.
Well, it said you're doing something illegal. If you continue, they will put a bounty on you. So I wonder, and then I guess maybe you can kill the bounty hunters. I don't know. Number 4 though is the missions that we did play and how they are structured. We played areas that will be familiar to people who have seen the gameplay so far. There was kind of rescuing the trauma team setup, rescuing somebody who seems quite wealthy from a kind of an illegal parts chop shop. We played that and the mission surrounding it, really, and a bit further on. And I've got to say that the way that the mission is layered, I mean, it's familiar to me from The Witcher. I guess I want to make 2 points. That it has that same density, and every character's got their own agenda. Lots of stakeholders in each mission. You always like simple proposition at the beginning, but then you meet someone who has another angle or another input to it, and you end up with like 4 or 5 characters that have got this fractious relationship with each other, and you're learning about them, and it's revealing like a color to the world. So that was fantastic, and it feels very noir as well, which I loved. And then just on the fact that they're balancing this complexity with, like we spoke about, when you're Geralt, you're Geralt. When you're V, you could be anybody from any background. So there's a real complexity to which I felt, like it's a real, like it was a knot of little mini quests building up to this big mission that we were doing.
Yeah, I think the ramifications of that are, I don't even want to think about it, the mathematics involved. I feel certain that, just choosing a different archetype from your friend, you're going to have conversations about Cyberpunk before you've even made different decisions, and things are going to be quite different. And the way that that's going to split off, I think, is massively exciting. But the thing that struck me that you said is about everyone having their own angle or agenda. I think probably CD Projekt Red are really well known for their quests and, just their sense of people having agendas, and also there being no clear-cut choice, really. And I really got that impression. Like I was fully invested with the gameplay, with the storyline that I was pursuing in the demo. I didn't get to see it through, which has really irked me. I want to finish that story, but we were basically presented with a series of characters it became apparent that they were up for just sort of like playing each other off and cutting each other out of deals and things, and it was up to me to decide, and there was really no indication of what was the right choice. And I think the answer to that is that there is no right choice. It's just a series of decisions, and there will be consequences, and it makes you, I think often in games I look for the right choice, and and to be like I do in life, I'd like to think. But and so it's just a completely new way to think, and it's really interesting to actually have to treat characters as people, and just think, like, how do I just feel about this person, and do I get the sense that they're lying to me, or do I get the sense that they're honest, or I agree, what will I get out of it? It's like, it makes it such a more deep experience than just so if I betray him, I'll get more money. It's like it's nothing like that.
And I want to just add two things to this. And I think that when you're being Geralt and making those decisions, it feels different to, and there were things that happened in The Witcher that I didn't expect or want, and I was like, oh man. But now I felt a bit more responsibility for it. Like, I'm me. I'm whatever character I'm being. Yeah. So there's a bit more kind of immersion in it for me there. Also, it ties into, again, with kind of, I mentioned I've spoken to a senior quest designer. He spoke about the philosophy of designing and trying to make it so that, there are maybe small choices that come along with the bigger choices. The one that you were talking about, I feel like, is probably quite a big choice, is whether to cut out the fixer who initially brings us into this deal. And he was kind of saying, they very deliberately don't mark good and bad choices, although the game does kind of keep track of whether you're making mostly positive or negative moral choices. But also, because some of them, he talks about a system of delayed consequences, where something might happen on that mission, but it might actually not come back until 7-10 hours later in the game. And that, for the individual playing, that really adds to the richness of the experience, and a lot of people might not get that. So it's kind of, I think there's a discussion internally of how much effort are we going to put into the game for things that people might not even see. But what it does do, when you don't know if decisions are good or bad, and you don't know exactly what's going to happen or the weight of those consequences, it makes every decision seem way more significant.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just way more rewarding when those consequences do eventually play out. It just makes the world feel real. It makes you and your impact on it feel real. And that's surely one of the most important kind of like ingredients in making an open world that feels believable, and that and a story that you feel like you've had your story. I think people are going to have their story in Cyberpunk 2077, and it sounds like that is going to come to fruition in a way unlike we've ever seen before. I can't wait to see what the choices I've made in that very first mission, like how they might unravel or unfold later in the game.
Do you know, I think we always talk about role-playing as a collaboration between people to make a story, and it kind of feels, like that is what's happening here when you're making your character. Number 5, we're going to go through these quite quickly. Number 5, Braindancing, which is a new thing that we were shown in this demo. I'm going to summarize it very quickly, Dave, and then you can talk to us about what it's like to actually play. Okay. Braindancing is effectively a kind of a cyberpunk way of recreating the sensation and the feeling of living through a certain point of time from the perspective of the person who's wearing a particular piece of technology. And it's kind of like the picture that they can look in Blade Runner, where they zoom and magnify, except it's a video of like a 3D, more than 3D lived experience.
Yes, exactly. I can't believe you went down the Blade Runner route, but you're absolutely right, and that does sum it up quite nicely. So we used braindancing to basically kind of scout out an area where we were going to do a mission, an office, someone's office. We were looking to steal something from someone's office. So our client had been to that office wearing this tech. She'd kind of recorded her experience, and then we were able to go inside, and it's like a kind of like a video editor almost. You kind of can spin through time, you can move your camera around within this kind of like small world, and you can look for details. You can use different kind of modes to search different layers. So there's like the visual layer, the audio layer, there's like the thermal layer, so you can look for heat signatures and things like that. And it's a way of preparing to do a job. I suppose that's how we experienced it anyway, was to kind of scout out an area and look for things that would help us do this job, look for where this guy was stashing this thing we wanted to steal, and to check out what kind of security systems he had installed and things like that, which could then inform your approach to going to get this thing. And it was a sizable part of the demo, I think, or like a decent chunk, which makes me think it's going to be something that comes back throughout the game. And I really enjoyed it. I love being a detective, and it had that kind of feeling of being a detective. You could, I felt if you wanted to interact with it quite a lot, you could probably really find out quite a lot of detail about the place you were going ahead of time and have an advantage. And if you weren't so interested in that, and you wanted to just kind of be a bit more freeform when you got there, I think you can do that too. But I love kind of detective modes and that sort of thing, and it felt very much like that. It was
mentioning
very cool.
Detective modes, I think it reminded me there is a kind of a crime reconstruction element to The Witcher 3, but there's also, I think, more similar to this, the Batman's in Arkham Knight and all of the Arkham games. Reasonably similar. This is more in depth, and I feel like it's, from what we've seen, it's going to be a larger mechanic, and I think it's probably more kind of what's the word, like it's more suited to this, more realistic within the premise of Cyberpunk, where
it felt
people
grounded, didn't it? It felt grounded in the world. It didn't even feel that that crazy. It felt like something we could one day get to. It wasn't just like a power. It felt something that was grounded in the technology of the place. It was cool.
Number 6. We're going to talk a little bit about combat, and and then we're going to talk a little bit about combat number 7 as well. But number 6, I want you to talk to me about the probably quite surprising fact that we maybe did more melee combat than we did shooting, although we did do some shooting.
Yeah, we certainly did. Yeah, I was surprised. I wasn't. Maybe I've done really terrible research about Cyberpunk 2077. I thought I'd followed everything, but I didn't realise that actually melee could be quite a big part of the game if you want it to be. So there is a whole melee system. You have a light attack and a heavy attack, and there's blocking. There's also dodging,
stamina, which
you can. And there's a stamina bar. There's dodging, which you can use with gunplay as well, obviously. And also your enemies have stamina, and they have light and heavy attacks as well, and they can guard too. So you can get into quite deep kind of melee battles with somebody, having to look after your stamina to some degree, having to take into account what they're up to. Like if they're blocking, you can only break their block with a heavy attack, that kind of thing. There are also melee weapons, and I know that you can decapitate people with katanas, which is something I didn't manage to do, and I'm very, very sad about. But melee, a whole thing that you can interact with if that's your thing.
I guess again it kind of comes down to how you're constructing your character, how you're playing. Do you know what I mean? Like whether not only your stats, but it's up to you whether you're the sort of V who is punching a lot of people, or you can also shoot people, Dave. We should make that point.
You can shoot people. I love the idea, by the way, of just that you can roleplay in this game, and if you want to roleplay as some sort of massive, angry, Hulk-like character who just doesn't bother with guns, you could definitely do that. I feel certain you could just be.
Let's play through number 3.
He's that guy who just always turns up with a sword. He just won't use a gun. It's so weird. Got to get that guy. But also there are guns. There are many guns. You can loot them from dead characters. You can mod them quite a lot. We didn't get to actually interact with the modding, but we did pick up loads of mods from bodies that we left in our wake. I got the impression that there are going to be a lot of guns, and that you're going to be able to kind of really get a feel for something in particular, and very much trick out your gun in the way that you want, which I think is really cool. And again, this goes down to that. I like the role-playing element of having like my gun. and or my style of play. It's not just like
you're a simple role player, Dave. Here is your gun. I love this gun.
Yeah, if I'm going to be playing a role-playing game, then I want my gun. I want my car, my gun, and my sword. Okay.
Well, it's quite difficult to divorce combat from our number 7. Number 7 is just being a cyber person, which is obviously really important to the whole world. The level of, I guess, but what I wanted to get across, referring back to our title, what it's actually like to play, is how does having cyber abilities like that kind of scan and interactiveness, how does it actually affect gameplay? One of the ways is in combat. You can quick hack things, which you can use either to try and distract people, so that you can use stealth, or just use stealth to kill one person like I inevitably will and then go loud. But there are also ways that you can interact with the environment, and that goes for non-combat situations as well. So could you lead us very quickly, David, through being a cyber person in Cyberpunk 2077?
I'll do my best, yeah. And it's probably an aspect of the game I was most excited about. I love that idea of the world of technology being integrated into people and also interconnected, and how that works. And I think they've done just an astonishing job of making that a reality in this game. And I also think they've done an astonishing job of making it not something you have to do at all if you don't want to. Like, you can, you have this technology. I think you're always going to have this kind of scanning eye ability. But if you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it at all. There's nothing that is integral in those systems that will mean that you can't progress if you don't do it. But if you want to do it, there's so much in the world that is available to you. I really was only able to scratch the surface in terms of interacting with it and exploring the full possibilities, because we were at the start of the game and our abilities were very low. But I think there is going to be a small amount of time of kind of reading the room, because there's so many options and everything is interconnected, and that's going to be a little bit overwhelming at first. But I think if you decide that that's a route you want to go down, and it's a route I want to go down, I think you are going to be able to sort of read the room and quickly identify what's around and and know what that means to you in terms of creating opportunities. I can use that to distract an enemy. These things are linked, so I can use that to create an explosion, and you can sort of chain things together. And then obviously as you increase your abilities, you can take that further and further.
It did feel a bit like where we were in the game. Again, 4 hours seems like a lot, but suddenly when you're playing an RPG, it's like, does Dave want to turn this fan on or not at the beginning of combat?
That was sort of it, yeah. I was like slowly raising the temperature in rooms and seeing if I could make enemies uncomfortable enough to leave. But no, it's like that kind of thing. I think, we've seen this sort of thing in games before, but the sheer scale of it in Cyberpunk 2077 is just insane. Like, there's so many options, and I like that. Equally, whilst you don't have to interact with it at all, I fully believe from what I've seen that you could put all your points, all your attributes into just interacting with it, and you could probably never pull a trigger and just walk into rooms, distract guards out of your way, lead them into traps, and set their grenades exploding and detonate their grenades, we should call that kind of thing. I think that it's just super exciting to see how people build their characters, and I bet you're going to see things on the internet. You're going to see people recording gameplay of being like just a super net runner and taking down swathes of enemies without ever pulling a trigger or swinging a fist. I think it's really, really cool.
And that is where we're going to leave it. That is Cyberpunk 2077. What it's actually like to play. Dave, thank you for talking through this with me. Thanks everybody for watching. We're going to have loads more in Cyberpunk 2077 as soon as we can. We're really looking forward to it coming at the end of the year. So stay with us.
PlayStation